Joan, Risa, Robin, Richard, Rob. I want you to know how honored I am to be standing here at Cy's funeral and speaking not just on behalf of our firm, but on behalf of the New York State Bar. Because this was a magnificent man. When I look at that smile, that contagious smile, you know that we all loved him and will continue to love him. Before I get into this talk, I want to say something for my firm, because I know it's not just the partners and the associates at the firm, but we have here secretaries, support staff, the receptionist is here, all because they loved Cy Boyers, because he meant that much to them, because he was a wonderful man. He was a mentor, he was a teacher, and more than anything else, I think if I had to sum up Cy in a word, he was a friend to all of us, but a true friend, a beloved friend, somebody who we really needed, and someone who took care of us, just like he took care of your family. I like to think of it that we are part of his family and you are part of our family at the firm, because you have been for so long. It's a wonderful thing. I had the unfortunate task, the unhappy task, of telling a number of Cy's friends that he had passed away. And it occurred to me while I was telling them this that they were friends of Cy's that hadn't just been friends for 2 years or 3 years or 5 or 25, 50. It just kept going with Cy. But I spoke to a few, and I'm going to mention them by name, one of whom is here. She was the presiding justice of the Appellate Division First Department and a judge in Manhattan beforehand, Betty Ellerin, who was a friend of Cy's for over 60 years. And Betty, I apologize, I'm sure I'm outing you right now as to how old you are. But when I told Betty Ellerin that Cy had passed away, she was in tears. She was broken up. And when you think about it, a friend like that, for that long, for that many years, 60 or 70 years, to know that you'll never have the opportunity to speak with Cy again, it really was crushing. It actually hurt. It was something that was so real, so raw, you could actually feel it. But it was because of who Cy was. I had the opportunity to go to dinner with Cy and Betty and so many others. And the friendship that they had was one where I got the feeling they would take a bullet for each other. That's how friendly they were. And there was another friend that I had called, Gabe Krausman, who's here right now as well. Gabe disagrees with you, Rob, because he actually said to me, in describing Cy, I didn't even ask, he just started talking, and when Gabe speaks, you know, I'm not going to interrupt him. He said he was the perfect human being. And I listened to you speak, and I thought about this as you were saying it. He wasn't perfect. I guess he was as close to perfect as you can get, but although he wore his tie and his soup, I guess that was Cy, and it was perfect for who he was, because that was Cy Boyers. And he really is a benchmark for all of us. My partner Howard had spoken to me the other day, and we were having a philosophical discussion about our work and what we do in the office. And we were talking about how it's unfortunate that so many people, so many good people, have bad things happen to them. Why is it that bad things happen to good people? And then we started thinking about Cy, and it sort of refreshed us, because good things do happen to good people. 92 years old, to have a smile like that, to know so many people, to have friends like the friends that he has. Everyone in this room was a friend of Cy's. Everyone in this room knew Cy and knew something about him. And it's because of that you think what you know about Cy and what you saw and why it was so real and why it hurt so much to know that he's not here anymore. I had the opportunity to go to Queen Supreme with Cy many times. He would often go in through the back entrance to the basement. And although when he went into the main part of the courthouse, into part 25, it was as if the waters would part. Cy Boyers walked in. But he couldn't even get in to see the judge because he had so many hellos to say to everybody else. Eventually got there. But even before he got there, when we were downstairs in the basement and Cy saw a custodian, it wasn't as if the custodian would say, "Hello, Mr. Boyers." They ran over to each other and embraced each other. And it really showed me that this man, this is who Cy was. He cared about people, as you said, equally. And he gave me something that I have in my office. It's a picture of Cy Boyers with Martin Luther King Jr. as a young man. And this was from the 1960s, the mid-1960s. And I asked Cy, how did you get this picture? What happened? And he told me the story of how, when he was a younger man, he was part of a Jewish organization, and he liked the message that Martin Luther King was spreading about equality, regardless of race, religion, creed, or color. Wish the politicians in Washington could have heard this conversation. They need it. But at any rate, he was talking about this, and I said, Cy, what happened? And he said, well, I never thought he would come, but we invited him to come speak to us. And sure enough, he said, yes. I said, so what did he speak about? He said, well, he spoke about the consideration for other people, and he spoke about the healing. And I said, tell me what it meant, Cy. And he said he was talking about, although he was not Jewish, and although he had a different religion, there was no reason that people couldn't get along. That message is something that is so powerful. Even today, I truly wish that others had heard Cy speak about this, because then they would know why Cy was so special and why he treated everyone equally, regardless of who they were, regardless of the walk of life, their station in life, as was said. This is what Cy was, and this is the beauty of this man. So I have to tell you, although he was a judge, administrative judge, a judge on the appellate division, he was a very powerful man, but he had an understated power. And I'm going to tell you a story. Some of the partners in my office said, don't tell this story. I'm going to tell this story. I'm up here right now. I can do this. 30 years ago, I was assigned a case. It was a very, very difficult liability case. Horrible damages. 3 generations of one family died in an accident, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, a 7-year-old. It was terrible. But the only way I could win the case was by cross-examining the defendant. And I had decided when I try this case, I'm going to try this case by cross-examining the defendant. I'll call the defendant first. And I'll tell you, it's known as a trial lawyer that if you call the defendant the adverse party, you can lead, you can cross-examine. Okay. The lawyer that I was trying the case against was the mayor of Queens. I don't mean the elected mayor, I mean the mayor of the courthouse. Some of you might remember this guy. I didn't like him at first, but I loved him afterwards. Abe Shapiro. So I'm trying a case against Abe Shapiro, and Abe was the one who told me when we would start the trial and who the judge was going to be. So we start the trial. I open, Abe opens, and I start cross-examining the defendant, my witness. And every single objection is sustained. There's nothing I could do. Judge, may I approach? No, counselor. Proceed. I had my text there. I had memos of law. Of course I can lead. No, you can't. All right. We break for lunch 20 minutes later. And I bump into Cy in the courthouse, and I tell him what had happened. And he said, wait a while, wait a while. This is an expression of it. Wait a while. Okay, I'll wait a while. Cy, I don't have a lot of time to wait. He goes, things are going to get better in the afternoon. I said, okay, make them get better, Cy. This is something right out of The Godfather. There's a scene in The Godfather, one of my favorite movies, favorite books, where Vincenzo Pantangeli happens to come into the Senate hearing room when Frankie Five Angels Pantangeli, you remember this one? Frankie Five Angels is about to testify and blow the lid off the Corleone family. And there's this guy sitting in the back. No one knows who he is. It's Vincenzo Pantangeli, just sitting there. He doesn't say a word, not a word. But that power actually doomed the government's case against the Corleone family. Okay, here's my case. In the afternoon, I know what's going to happen. I'm getting hosed by Abe Shapiro and the judge. I won't even mention the name of this judge. But Cy Boyers is in the back of the courtroom. I start, just like I had in the morning, I start off leading, and Abe Shapiro objects. Objection, leading. And the judge, I swear to you, says, counsel, this is the defendant. Of course he's leading. I thought, okay, now that's power. I looked back, I saw this Cheshire smile as you described it. Yeah, that's what I saw. Everything was going just fine until something else happened, and I was told not to mention this either. I'm going to mention this too. Cy Boyers had a weak bladder, and he had to go to the bathroom. And every time he went to the bathroom, I was getting hosed again. So I consider myself a teacher of trial techniques, and I use the only technique I knew. Judge, I've got to go to the bathroom too. So I went to the bathroom and I told Cy very clearly, Cy, you may not go to the bathroom anymore. Needless to say, the case worked out. And at the end of the case, I became friendly with Abe Shapiro. And he said to me, you did something good. And I expected Abe to tell me what a great summation I gave or the cross-examination. He said to me, good move bringing Cy in. It was a good move. And that's why I love that man. He had an understated power, but he was a beautiful man. Now, I heard about football and things like this that you spoke about. In fact, there's one of his friends, speak about friends for a long time. I just happened to speak with Don Sitek, a friend from law school. His father went to high school with Cy Boyers and played sports with him. But Cy was on the football team there, the football team at Syracuse. What you didn't know is something I'm about to tell you because my office wanted me to share this with you. Cy was a running back in the office. If Dick Brown called, or any other friend of his happened to call, and he was at what was Tony Gare's office all the way in the back, but his office was on the other side, about 100 yards away, Cy never said, tell him I'll call him back. Instead, what he did was he took off. And I mean running, full speed, at 70 years old, at 75 years old, 80, he just kept going. Never took out a secretary, never took out a file clerk. Somehow he managed to get around them. But we were all amazed with what he was doing. And the driving? Okay, I'll tell you my story about driving. It wasn't just the double yellow lines, Rob. You had that right. But stop signs, traffic lights, those were optional to him. I hadn't yet learned why no one else wanted a ride when I was a younger lawyer, and I took a ride with Cy. Sure enough, we're leaving Queens Supreme, and he goes right through a stop sign, and I know what's coming. I know there's going to be, sure enough, there's a police officer, and I think this is going to be ugly. This is just going to be ugly. Pull Cy over, and Cy, before, what happens when somebody pulls you over? The first thing that they say is license and registration. Cy rolls down the window. Hello, officer, Judge Boyers here, nice to see you. And he's got that smile on his face. The officer kind of just looked at him and, hello, Judge Boyers, maybe you could slow down? Thank you, officer, we'll see you. It was an amazing thing. That quiet respect that he had was winning the day. It was about 6 years ago, almost to the day, when I stood right here at this lectern. A partner of ours had passed away. I was delivering a eulogy for Bob Conason. And I think if I had to speak about Bob Conason and what he had done for the firm, one of the very best hires that Bob Conason ever made was bringing in Cy Boyers to the firm. Because I can't think of a man who had more respect than Cy Boyers. As a statesman for our firm, we are the lucky ones to have had Cy working with us. I know he considered himself lucky to be at the firm. We were really the lucky ones to have him because he was a magnificent man. Well, after that funeral, Bob Conason's funeral, I realized it's a shame that we can't hear from Bob anymore. And it would be a shame if we didn't hear from Cy anymore. So I decided to do something, and I never told any of you about this. But what I decided to do was to bring Cy into my office. And I videotaped him. And I asked him questions about his life. And I asked him questions about his family, about his jobs, about his work, about many of you who are sitting in this audience today. And I started off asking him, I said, Cy, what is the greatest achievement, the greatest achievement, accomplishment in your life? He had no idea what I was going to ask him, but he was game. And he said, without even pausing, he said, the greatest? He goes, marrying Joan. And that's who Cy was. I asked him about his children. I said, Cy, what would you like to say? What would you like to say to your children in 20 years? And he said, no. My children know what I want to say to them, but my grandchildren. I said, okay. What would you like to say to your grandchildren in 20 years? And he said, I'd like to tell them about service, about helping and assisting others. That's what he said. I'd like them to know that the best thing that they could ever do is to help and to assist others. And so, Gabe Krausman was right that this is a perfect human being. Can you think about anything more perfect than wanting to help and to assist others? That's who Seymour Boyers was to us. That's why we all love Seymour Boyers. That's why he was a friend to every one of us. And that's why we are all so fortunate to have had Seymour Boyers in our life, because we will never forget that man. And Joe and I will tell you this: we loved him. We're all lucky to have had Cy in our lives.